The rain was relentless that night, falling in thick silver sheets that blurred the world into shadows and sound. Thunder rolled across the valley, and the small town of Ashwood seemed to hold its breath as the storm raged on. By the roadside, under a flickering streetlight, a little boy stood alone. He couldn't have been older than 5. His hair clung to his forehead, his small hands wrapped tightly around a soaked teddy bear. The bear's button eye was missing, and its fur was matted with mud, but the boy held it like it was the only thing keeping him safe. His name was Ben, though he didn't remember anyone ever saying it softly anymore. The last voice that had called him Benny was fading with the echo of the storm. He remembered a car door slamming, the sound of feet running, then nothing but rain. When the headlights appeared in the distance, Ben didn't move. He just stared, eyes wide, until the car slowed and stopped beside him. A woman's voice gasped from inside. "Oh my God, there's a child out there." Moments later, the door flew open, and Helen Matthews, a local schoolteacher, rushed toward him with an umbrella. Her husband, Tom, followed with his coat in hand. "Hey, sweetheart," Helen whispered, crouching down. "Where are your parents?" Ben didn't answer. He just held up his bear, shivering. Helen wrapped the coat around him and lifted him into her arms. "It's okay. You're safe now." At the police station, the storm still roared outside. Officers asked questions, where he'd been, who he was. But the boy stayed silent. He only repeated one thing over and over in a trembling voice. "Mommy said she'd come back when the rain stops." No one came. Days turned into weeks, and no one claimed the boy. No missing child reports matched his description. The authorities named him Benjamin Rain Matthews after the night they found him. Helen and Tom visited often, bringing him toys and food. The connection grew naturally. He smiled only when Helen entered the room. And when she asked if he wanted to come live with them for a while, Ben nodded without hesitation. The Matthews home was small but warm, filled with the smell of bread and the sound of an old radio. For the first time, Ben had a bed that was truly his, a window that opened to the morning light. He learned to laugh again, softly at first, then freely, but every time it rained, he froze. He would sit by the window, holding his bear, waiting. "Do you remember anything, sweetheart?" Helen would ask gently. Ben would shake his head, eyes on the glass. "Just the rain, and her song." "What song?" He hummed a few broken notes, sweet, haunting and familiar even to Helen, though she couldn't place it. That melody would follow him for years, buried deep like a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom. As Ben grew older, the memories of that stormy night became foggy, dreamlike. He stopped asking questions, stopped hoping for answers. But sometimes, in the quiet after a storm, he thought he could still hear her voice, soft and distant, calling his name. And though he didn't know it yet, that voice would find him again. Just not in the way he expected. If you were in Ben's place, would you keep searching for your past? Or try to forget it completely? Comment below what you would do. Years passed, and Ben grew into a quiet, observant boy. The Matthews raised him as their own, never hiding the truth about his past, but never pressing him to remember either. Ashwood was a peaceful place, small houses, friendly neighbors, and long summers that smelled of cut grass and rain. To most people, Ben seemed perfectly fine, polite, helpful, bright in school. But inside there was a hollow space he couldn't name. Sometimes in class, when the rain began tapping against the windows, he would drift away, staring outside as if the world beyond the glass might hold the answers he'd lost. His teacher would call his name once, twice, before he'd blink and return. Helen noticed. She always noticed. One evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, she found him sitting on the porch, legs tucked to his chest, the old teddy bear beside him. "Storm's coming," she said softly. "I know," Ben whispered. "I can feel it." Helen sat next to him, wrapping her arm around his shoulders. "You don't have to be afraid of it anymore, you know." "I'm not," he said. "But every time it rains, I think she's out there somewhere, like she's trying to tell me something." Helen's heart ached. She wanted to tell him that maybe his mother had done what she thought was best, but she couldn't. Not yet. So she just held him closer and said, "Then maybe one day, when the time is right, You'll know what she wanted to say. As the years went on, Ben learned to push the storm away from his mind. He joined the school's carpentry club, discovered he had a natural talent for building things, small birdhouses, picture frames, even furniture. He liked the feeling of creating something solid, something that wouldn't vanish overnight. By the time he turned 18, he had stopped asking questions about where he came from. The only clue to his past was a small silver pendant he'd been wearing the night he was found, shaped like a teardrop with the letter L engraved inside. No one could tell what it meant. He carried it with him everywhere, more out of habit than hope. In his 20s, Ben became a carpenter by trade. He moved to the nearby town of Riverside, where he opened a small workshop and lived a simple life. His adoptive parents visited often, and though he loved them deeply, there was always a shadow in his eyes that never quite disappeared. Some nights, he'd dream of a woman's voice humming that same lullaby, soft and distant, carried by the sound of falling rain. When he woke, he could almost feel her hand on his cheek. But as he reached his 30s, those dreams came less often. The past was like an old photograph, faded, silent, nearly forgotten, until the day he stumbled upon the album. It was an ordinary Saturday morning. Ben was wandering through a charity bazaar, searching for an old wooden frame he could restore. He wasn't looking for anything special, just something to fill the quiet hours. But then, under a pile of dusty books and porcelain cups, he saw it, a leather-bound album, its cover cracked and worn, tied shut with a faded blue ribbon. Something about it made him pause. He untied the ribbon and opened the first page. Inside were photos, families, birthdays, old houses, children playing in backyards. Nothing unusual, until he turned to the last page. And there he was, a small boy, maybe 5 years old, standing in a sunlit field, clutching a teddy bear with one missing eye. His heart stopped. He recognized that bear instantly. On the back of the photo, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "My Benny. I'll find you when the sun comes back." The air seemed to vanish from his lungs. His hands trembled as he stared at the picture, unable to move. He didn't know it yet, but that single photograph was about to change everything. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that the album had found him on purpose. He took it home, laid it carefully on his workbench, and stared at it for a long time. The photograph of the little boy, of himself, was now resting in front of him, lit by the warm glow of his desk lamp. He traced his fingers over the image, half expecting it to fade like a dream. But it didn't. It was real. So were the words on the back. "My Benny. I'll find you when the sun comes back." Who had written them? His mother? Someone else? The handwriting looked fragile, almost desperate. Ben stayed awake that night, turning the pages of the album again and again. Each photo told a story, a picnic, a wedding, a newborn baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Some of the faces appeared several times. A smiling woman with long, dark hair and gentle eyes. A man standing beside her, tall and proud. He didn't recognize them, but something deep inside him stirred. He noticed a small note tucked behind one of the pictures. It was an address, faded but legible, in Hollow Creek, a town about 50 miles away. The next morning, without hesitation, Ben packed the album into his truck and drove there. Hollow Creek was the kind of place that hadn't changed much in decades. Narrow streets, brick houses, and a diner that still served coffee for $1. He walked into the town library, carrying the album under his arm, and approached the front desk. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you happen to know anyone from the Parker family?" The librarian, a gray-haired woman with bright blue eyes, looked up. "Parker? You mean Lydia Parker?" Ben froze. The name echoed in his mind like a half-remembered melody. L. Parker, the letter L engraved on his pendant. "Yes," he said quietly. "Lydia Parker. Do you know where I can find her?" The woman's expression softened. "Oh, sweetheart. Lydia passed away a long time ago, but her sister still lives out on Maple Road. Name's Ruth. She doesn't get many visitors." Ben thanked her and drove toward Maple Road, his heart pounding. The road led him past old oak trees and weathered barns until he reached a small white house with a sagging porch. He stepped out of the truck and knocked. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that studied him carefully. "Can I help you?" she asked. "My name's Ben Matthews," he began. "I found this photo album at a charity bazaar, and I think it belonged to your family." He opened the album to the last page and showed her the photograph. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened. "Dear God, where did you get that?" "It was mixed in with old books," Ben said. "But that's me. That's me in the picture." Ruth stared at him for a long time, trembling. Then she whispered, "You look just like her." "Like who?" "Lydia," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "My sister. She used to call her son Benny." The room seemed to tilt. Ben gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. "Her son?" Ruth nodded slowly. "Yes. You were her boy. She loved you more than anything." Ben felt his throat tighten. "Then why did she leave me?" Ruth's face clouded with pain. "It wasn't by choice," she said softly. "You need to know what really happened that night, but it's not an easy story to hear." Ben sat down, his pulse racing. Outside, the rain began to fall again, softly at first, like a whisper. And as Ruth began to speak, he realized the storm from his past was far from over. Ruth led Ben to the living room where time seemed frozen. Family photos covered the walls, sepia tones, faces of people long gone. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She motioned for him to sit, then poured tea into 2 old porcelain cups. "I never thought I'd see you again," she said quietly, her hands trembling. "Lydia talked about you until the very end." Ben leaned forward, eyes searching hers. "Please, tell me what happened." Ruth sighed, her gaze drifting toward a photograph of a young woman with soft features and kind eyes. "My sister was only 19 when she had you. It was 1979. Our family didn't approve of the man she loved. He was older, poor, and came from the wrong side of town. His name was Daniel Ross." Ben frowned. "Ross?" "Yes. They were in love, but our father was strict. When he found out Lydia was pregnant, he forced Daniel to leave town. Lydia refused to give you up, so she ran away with you. For years no one knew where she'd gone. She worked odd jobs, raised you alone, but it was hard. She barely had enough to eat." Ruth's voice broke slightly as she continued. "When you were 5, there was a storm, one of the worst we'd ever had. Lydia came back to town that night, desperate. She showed up at my door soaking wet, holding you in her arms. She begged me for help, but Father was still alive then, and he threatened to have you both taken away if she didn't leave immediately." Ben's hands clenched. "He did what?" She was terrified. Ruth whispered. "He had power in this town. Connections with the police, the church, everything. Lydia wanted to protect you. She said, if I leave him somewhere safe, maybe he'll have a chance at a better life. I tried to stop her, Ben. I swear I did." Ben's breath caught. His vision blurred as Ruth went on. "She carried you into that storm and disappeared into the night. Hours later, someone found your teddy bear on the road. Lydia came back the next morning to get you, but it was too late. The police said you'd been taken to a children's home. She tried to find you for years, but the system lost all the records. She never gave up." Tears rolled down Ruth's cheeks. She kept that album, adding photos, notes, anything that might help her recognize you someday. She left it behind when she got sick, hoping someone might find it and bring it to you. That was her way of saying she never stopped looking. Ben sat in stunned silence. The pendant around his neck suddenly felt heavy. He held it up, showing Ruth the engraved letter. The L, that was her, wasn't it? Ruth nodded, smiling sadly. "Lydia Parker. That was your mother's pendant. She gave it to you the night she said goodbye." Ben looked down, tears welling in his eyes. The storm that had haunted him his whole life now made sense. It wasn't just weather. It was the night love turned into sacrifice. "I spent years wondering why I wasn't wanted," he said softly. "And all this time, she was the one who never stopped wanting me." Ruth reached for his hand. She died 10 years ago, Ben. But she left something for you. She stood up, went to an old wooden chest and pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside was a faded envelope with Ben's name written in delicate handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age. My dearest Benny, if you ever find this, it means my prayers were heard. I never wanted to leave you. I only wanted you to live without fear. You were my sun in the rain, my reason to keep breathing. Forgive me if I couldn't find you sooner. I carried your name in every heartbeat. Love, Mom. Ben pressed the letter to his chest, unable to speak. The rain outside had stopped. The clouds were parting, and through the window, sunlight spilled across the floor. It was as if the sun had finally come back, just like she promised. For a long time, Ben just sat there staring at his mother's handwriting. Each word felt like a breath pulled back from time itself, fragile, trembling, alive. The letter was more than paper. It was proof that love could survive even when everything else was lost. Ruth watched him quietly, tears glistening in her eyes. She would have wanted you to have peace, she said softly. She never forgave herself, but she never stopped believing you were out there, growing, laughing, building a life. Ben smiled weakly. She was right. I just wish I could have told her that I was okay. You just did, Ruth replied. They spent hours together that afternoon, going through Lydia's old belongings, photos, journals, and little keepsakes. Each object was a doorway to a story Ben had never heard. A lock of hair tied with a ribbon. A music box that played the same melody he used to hum as a child. The song that had followed him through all those years wasn't a ghost. It was his mother's lullaby, echoing from the past, still alive in him. That night, Ruth offered him a room to stay. Ben accepted. For the first time, he didn't feel like a visitor in his own story. The next morning, when the sun rose over Hollow Creek, the light spilled through the window and touched the photo of Lydia and baby Ben sitting on the dresser. He stood there, staring at it for a long time. Then carefully he placed his mother's pendant beside the frame. I found you, Mom, he whispered. And somehow you found me too. After breakfast, Ben drove to the cemetery on the edge of town. The grass was damp from the morning dew and the air smelled of pine and rain. Ruth had given him directions to Lydia's grave, a simple stone with the inscription, Lydia Parker Ross, 1960-2005. The sun will come back. Ben knelt beside it and placed a fresh sunflower on the soil. You kept your promise, he said quietly. The sun came back. A gentle breeze passed through the trees, and for a moment, he could almost hear her humming again. The same soft lullaby that had guided him through his dreams for decades. He didn't cry this time. He just smiled. When he returned home to Riverside, he hung the framed photograph from the album above his workbench. Every time he looked at it, he remembered where he came from. Not a place of abandonment, but of love disguised as loss. His workshop soon became a place filled with light. People often asked about the picture on the wall, and he would tell them, that's a reminder that sometimes we lose things so that we can find them again. Years later, when Helen and Tom passed away, Ben built a bench under a tree behind his house, carving into the wood the same words written on that photograph. My Benny, I'll find you when the sun comes back. He would sit there often, watching the sky turn gold at dusk, and he realized something he wished he'd known as a boy, that love doesn't vanish when people do. It lingers in memories, in songs, in the quiet things they leave behind. And sometimes when the wind carried the scent of rain, Ben would look up and smile, because he no longer feared the storm. It had brought him home. Do you believe love can outlast time itself? If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this one.